Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Warriors Corner for the next panel presentation. The title is Optimizing the Organic Industrial Base. Today we have Ms. Liz Miranda, the Executive Deputy to the Commanding General, Headquarters AMC. Her partner, Colonel Matt Alexander, he's the SIG for Headquarters AMC. Colonel Brent Avazian, he is the Director for our OIB Ops Center at Headquarters AMC. And the moderator will be Mr. Travis Themis.
Testing. All right, good afternoon, everybody. See a lot of really familiar faces out here, so I'm excited to get going on this panel. As I was introduced, my name is Travis Themis, and I am the Chief of the OIB Modernization and Strategy Division here at AMC Headquarters. Over the last couple days, we've been hearing a lot about a transformation effort that's been ongoing with the OIB. There's a lot of different attributes that we've been hearing that describe this transformation. Some of those are as adapt faster, innovate more, optimize how we deliver capabilities to the warfighters, modernize our infrastructure, adapt to advanced digital tools, and fostering industrial partnerships as we reimagine the industrial base for the future. At the heart of this transformation is the OIB Integration Office and Operations Center, which work both together to synchronize our strategy and execution. Today, that's going to be the main topic of our discussion. The Integration Office serves as the strategic hub, aligning enterprise-wide requirements and priorities, while the Operations Center ensures that these priorities are operationalized across the AMC. Together, they form the backbone of Army's efforts to modernize and optimize the OIB. Okay? So I would like to kick off my first question to Colonel Alexander. Sir, if you could, can you explain the role of the OIB Integration Office and how it is shaping the transformation of the OIB?
Yeah. All right, this one works. So Matt Alexander, for the last 4 months, I've been living in D.C., trying to transform how we think about the organic industrial base of the United States Army. But before we go into the transformation of that, I'd kind of want to bring you up to speed about the catalyst that got us here. So when the Army rolled out the Army Transformation Initiative, it had some directed guidance to the industrial base sites. A few months after that, it led Army Materiel Command to do an in-depth study of the workload that goes on at each of those sites. And what we realized was almost each and every one of our industrial base sites is underutilized. And what we were able to capture from that study is a healthy range of depot labor hours per site that we needed to target. That also helped inform us that, candidly, the Army doesn't have enough work programmed for each site to meet that level of healthy depot labor hours. So we had to reimagine how we workload the OIB. And that's where we started, by bringing together a team of Army Materiel Command, ASALT, INE, and the DAG-4 to understand the workloading process of the OIB and how we transform that. And so that is what led to the creation of the OIB Integration Office and the strategy that we've been writing over the last 4 months that we just received approval on Monday from Army senior leaders. What that strategy tries to do, or aims to do, is look at increasing visibility of the OIB throughout the acquisition lifecycle. And not to get in too specific terms for you, but get left of milestone C decisions, get decisions out of just Cat 1 levels. And as we understand the work that goes into the OIB, try and define what the minimum rates are by major weapon system by site, so we can define that by each site and understand the minimum required work the Army needs to program at each site, and then where there's potential for external opportunity through some of your industries or private capital investment to get us up to that healthy depot labor hour range. And so that is a very quick summation of what the goal of OIB transformation is.
Hey, thank you, sir. Could you elaborate a little bit on how you see the operations cell complement the work of the integration office?
Yeah, absolutely. So the construct of the operations office itself, or excuse me, the innovation office, again, some members from Army Material Command, some members from ASALT. And as we look at getting left of requirements in the acquisition cycle, we look to our ASALT teammates for the strategic planning and guidance of what we're going to workload inside of the organic industrial base. As the innovation office works with ASALT to approve that future workloading, there's going to be a natural progression to the execution and ownership of those activities at each site. That execution and ownership is going to be conducted by AMC's operations cell.
Thank you, sir. And one more. What do you define the fundamental problem we're trying to address? And what does the new paradigm look like once we reach full operational capacity?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. So the fundamental problem we saw was just visibility of how we workload the OIB again across that acquisition lifecycle. So we've done a couple things to try and help us with that. The first is the team in the integration office is going to look at what we consider the procedural flaw of workloading the OIB. And so things like level of repair analysis or depot source of repair analysis, those decisions we make that bring the OIB into the acquisition lifecycle need to happen a little bit earlier in that cycle. Part of gaining that visibility is, as General Mohan discussed this morning, data analytics that we're working with both ASALT and AMC to improve. So we have created a platform that we call the OIB Analytics and Planning Platform that's going to integrate with ASALT Live and then also integrate with things like Weapon Systems 360 and then eventually OIB 360 at AMC to help us give that end-to-end visibility across the acquisition lifecycle. So as your program managers are planning for the future programs of record and how we sustain them, the OAP, the OAPP, provides us visibility of the amount of depot labor hours by site that are being programmed by major weapon system. And so what that allows us to understand is which sites need priority work from an Army programming perspective and which sites may need a little bit of external opportunity from some of our industry partnerships. With, again, the common goal being to raise the overall depot labor hours at each site. And so, yeah, I'd say visibility of that acquisition life cycle and then overall visibility of a lot of the metrics that are going into how we program the OIB is what's going to set this integration office up for success.
Thank you, sir. Over to Colonel Vazian. Sir, as the director of the Operations Center, can you elaborate how it collaborates with the integration office to drive this transformational effort?
Yeah, Travis, thanks. So to begin with, like Matt had said, let me back up a little bit and how the Operations Center concept became a thing. So early last summer, the Army was directed to conduct an assessment of the organic industrial base. I was actually part of that team that went out to each and every OIB site along with the AMC analysis group. And part of the problem, like Matt had said, the way we workload the depots was a systemic problem. But also what we found out during the course of that study is that there were various entities throughout the AMC enterprise, each having a small piece of touching the OIB, but they never really were integrated or really spoke or cross-talked. So that there were just a lot of different efforts going on, a lot of activity, and not necessarily a lot of collective accomplishment. So one of the recommendations was to pull each and every one of those functions up a level to the AMC headquarters level and kind of put them all underneath one umbrella so that there's enterprise visibility over everything that the OIB touches within both the headquarters itself as well as down at the LCMCs all the way down to the OIB sites themselves. So, what Matt was saying as far as the integration office and how they operate up at the at the HQDA headquarters level is they take a look at the long-term enterprise approach. They take input from Army G4, ASALT, the entire acquisition process itself, AMC, and figure out long-term how to, what the plan needs to look like. And that is the long-term vision. And then as they formulate that strategy, it is then sent down to the AMC OIB Operations Center to figure out how to execute within the OIB itself, how to evenly distribute that workload to make sure that we're monitoring those direct labor hours are distributed evenly, and that each of the sites are workloaded, because part of that is also maintaining the skill sets that we need on hand for surge capability. So that's essentially what the Operations Center does. How we integrate is, obviously we talk daily basis. We have same visibility tools, and we keep regular touch points so that as these decisions are made from higher headquarters, we can execute down and then also provide bottom-up feedback and understand at the headquarters level what the impacts of those decisions are and how we refine that.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Ms. Miranda. One new facet of the OIB transformation strategy is an emphasis on industrial partnerships. Can you enlighten us on what that means and the mechanisms we have to enact them?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. Absolutely. So I would like to add one more thing before I answer Travis' question. So first, Matt and Brett talked a little bit about how we're structurally changing, right, that synchronization of effort, because definitely that was a big gap that we identified. We also talked right now, right, a little bit about workload, right? So workload certainly has resulted in the sub-optimization of our organic industrial base, as that has changed over the years, right? Two more things that I would like to discuss. One is rates, right? Because I know that's a big factor when it comes to what I'm going to talk about next, which is how do we partner with you all, right, with industry, to continue to optimize the organic industrial base. So rates is going to be a point of discussion, right? Because that directly translates into cost, right? So we are addressing that through a rates reform process. Certainly in the last year, we have reduced costs significantly at the organic industrial base in the hundreds of millions of dollars per year, right? In 26, we reduced cost, I think it was like $300 million. Same thing for FY27, and we will continue to look at cost reduction opportunities. That's one. We're also working rate reform, not only internal to the department, but also with Congress. What does that mean? How can we do business differently to make the organic industrial base more, more open for business, right? So that it's enticing to you to come and partner with us to do the things that the nation requires, right? So those are also aspects of things that we're doing through this OIB transformation, because we need to look at it from, a more holistic view from all those gaps, and we're addressing them all. The third thing that it's really critical within the transformation strategy is, has been mentioned before, is that industry partnership, right? And we have, for the past few months, how do I say it? It's not, these are no new strategies or ways to partner. They have been authorities that we've had for years, and we have, to some extent, executed them, but not to the levels that we want to do them now. But at the same time, we know that there are obstacles and challenges, right, to execute those authorities, that over the years, it just take us too long to get to a partnership, right, that is a win-win for both, for the organic industrial base and industry. So we know there are challenges that we're working through. But what we are doing, and you have probably seen action, right, is moving from strategy to action by showing you that, yes, we can execute those partnerships in a more streamlined manner, in a more timely manner, and we have real, right, partnerships that have become reality in the last few months, and those happened rather quickly, right? There's a focused effort to really reduce the time that it takes to get into these partnerships. Why, right? Why? And Matt said that, right? The Army cannot fix this problem on its own, right? The Army most definitely needs partnership with industry, and we need you, right, to understand and be informed as to what opportunities exist. So working really hard on one, understanding that we are part of that challenge and we need to fix those processes and also the reasons why in the past we have not fully leveraged those opportunities, right? So we know that we have an urgent need in the United States to increase production capacity. We know that that is right in front of us. We see it today, right, in current conflict. We need to expand our capacity. How do we do that? The organic industrial base, has available resources. We talked about underutilized capacity. We have not just land, facilities, but skilled workforce that is ready to partner with you in your space on whatever it is that you need. So how is the Army going or doing this, right? So we have opened primarily a few doors, like I said, authorities that have been in place for some time, but we're really looking at how to streamline and execute those in a more timely manner. So enhanced use leases is one of those big opportunities, and that is really, leasing underutilized land and facilities that can generate revenue for the Army, while giving you the land, the facilities, the skilled workforce, if that's what you need to bring that investment into the organic industrial base. Really a win-win situation here, because we do get to modernize aging facility, and as General Mohan said, and it's been said, right, said it yesterday too, without only relying on government funding, because that's very, very limited, right? So how we can partner to increase that production capacity is what we're looking at. And again, leveraging every available resource that the organic industrial base can provide. We're also exploring what we're calling bundle pilots, right? Where we have multiple things that can be part of that agreement that, again, can meet your need and accelerate that production capacity. We're one example that we're talking about is the Army Logistics Hub that gives us a long-term partnership for bringing that innovation and technology insertion, right? And at the same time, the win-win is we give you predictable demand signal, right? You can leverage already existing workforce. So there are things that we already have that we can offer to you. Public-private partnerships is, again, another tool. This one is probably, to my my understanding, is the most flexible one, right? Because it can be very, very simple and or very complex, right? Depending on what is needed. But certainly, we have the resources, and you have the need, and we just have to figure out what that is. What that value proposition is for both, for the government and you. And then we also have collaboration with government entities. Academia is a big one, right? We have a lot of partnerships that we have put in place in the last few months, really leveraging the knowledge, right? The academia's knowledge, the tools and resources that they have, and bring those into the organic industrial base to accelerate our learning and our capability. So, like I said, there are barriers to this. We're really very, very interested in knowing what ideas, what opportunities exist. We are communicating this to you all through commercial solutions, right, opportunities, and we are, or RFIs, right, so we're communicating what we see as opportunities, and we want, the areas that we're thinking about, and getting those ideas in so that we can start reviewing and identifying opportunities, partner. So keep an eye on those, because they are coming out, right? So the RFI is already on the street. The CSOs are, continuously being put out for us to inform you on what opportunities we have in the organic industrial base. There's a perception of bureaucracy, right? Our processes are long, our policies are restrictive, right? Cost is a problem, right? All of those things, what I'm here to tell you is identify those. Don't miss an opportunity, right, to really have those discussions if you believe that you can leverage and benefit from what the organic industrial base has to offer. We'll work through those, right, in those conversations, because that's the intent. The intent is to don't think of as it will continue to be bureaucratic process. Now we're breaking those obstacles. We're removing those obstacles so that we can get to a partnership opportunity in a more faster, right? So the potential for collaboration is there. I encourage you to continue to stay informed as to those opportunities, and then continue to let us know what other opportunities you think of that we may not have necessarily an RFI or a commercial request out there for you. Just continue to communicate what you believe are those opportunities. I think that's it. Those are the three things that I really wanted to highlight, and I hope that was good information to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. So I'll open up the floor to the panel, see if there's any additional comments on that subject, and then we'll reach out to the crowd and see if there's additional questions.
Anything else? The industry days, ma'am? Yeah. Yes, ma'am. So certainly. So as far as that goes, one of the things we started at the AMC headquarters, aligned with headquarters of the Army, is opening up industry days at our organic industrial base. So as an example, last week, in conjunction with the Munitions Executive Summit in New Jersey, Army Contracting Command, Rock Island, put on and hosted an industry day immediately following that, with the intent and the goal of informing industry what capacity is available at our OIB sites, potentially getting into public-private partnerships and or co-production agreements. So it started out, there were over 500 industry partners there. We'd given an overview of all the capability and capacity at our munitions sites, and then we spent a series of one-on-one engagements with the industry partners afterwards, hoping to create further opportunities. So we also have additional ones scheduled for our TACOM as well as CCOM coming up in the next couple of months. So those are some of the efforts that we've gone, and we're pushing forward with as far as industry days and developing industry partnerships for our OIB. Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Roger Flores. I'm with KSO Worldwide. Right now we were tasked to rebuild Bradley tanks. We have 21 and another 50 ready to go. The last parts we need are hatches. And TACOM, they said they'll work with us, but they never call us back. So you basically have, 50, 60 tanks sitting there ready to go with weapons, and everybody sends me emails back as I'll get back to you. These are ready to go. They can go in theater as soon as we put the hatches on. Is there a way that we can get around that, or somebody help us get the hatches? It's a government contract.
All right, any other questions from the crowd? Yes, sir, right over here, ma'am.
Okay. Ted Cummings with Armis. On the cybersecurity front, is there an intent to look at cybersecurity beyond OIB? OIB is operational technology, but you also have MCOM that has FRCS use cases that are OT. Is the command looking broadly at solutions, not just in the OIB silo, but across other OT use cases?
Yeah, Yeah, most definitely. So we're working really closely with the CIO, right, and addressing any critical cybersecurity issues that we have. There's no, how do I say this? From an OIB modernization perspective, most definitely it's a line of effort. It's well documented on how we're going to address it. I think what you're asking is beyond, right, the organic industrial base. That is still a work in progress. Certainly, we're addressing the most critical needs, but there's no overarching strategy, if you will. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Amy Hawkins. I run the Technical Center for Odyssey Systems. And you mentioned academic partnerships and academic groups that you're working with. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what groups you're working with and what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of examples. One, so you've probably heard, right? We're looking to expand our production of drones, right? So what does that mean? That's just one example of a capability that we're heavily investing in, but it's part of our larger advanced manufacturing capability that we're establishing across, right, the Army. But one great partner there is Wichita State University, right, and the NIR Group, and they have been incredibly open to understanding our challenges and identifying solutions and how we can streamline our processes and really accelerate identification of, opportunities to qualify parts, right? To either redesign, re-engineer, and or produce advanced manufacture parts, right? So that's one partnership opportunity. But we have, like that, we have many. Each organic industrial based site has partnerships with their local universities to develop the talent, right, that we need within the organic industrial base. Those are in the hundreds of partnerships because they are more localized. But there are also other, more strategic partnerships that we have and that we will continue to work on. When I said the drone production, academia is part of that ecosystem that we're trying to build, right? So it's not just government, but it's also industry partnerships and academia to continue to evolve that technology and implement those best practices and into our production capabilities, right? So those are just a few examples of how we're leveraging academia for evolving and transforming the organic industrial base.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we have a couple more minutes if there's any additional questions.
James Mitchell, University of South Florida, Institute of Applied Engineering. Apologies if this shows my interest in the OIB, but how do you maintain, 40 hours a week, one FTE for folks, but acknowledging at some point we may go to, 24 hours a day operations and balance that so we're ready, but we're not overusing or underworking people?
Yeah, so the easiest answer to that is we don't. The Army is the worst customer when it comes to sending a good demand signal. And so that's why we're looking to partner with industry so we can level out that demand signal, try and bring those rates down. And so I think what we owe you that the integration office has done over the last 4 months is an analysis of the work that goes on at each site and where we see those ebbs and flows of workload. So I can highlight by site where we think there's opportunity for industry partners to help us even out that.
All right, I think we're up against time, so I personally want to thank all the panel members today for their time and expertise on this subject. I'm sure we'll be hanging around the area a little bit. If there's any additional questions, feel free to come up and chat. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to this panel. We did one last year, and we're going to change it a little bit more. So we're going to talk foundational protection as well as operational protection, all what's tied to formation-based layer protection. So I'm the current director of the Transformation Integration Directorate, part of the Maneuver Support Center of Excellence. With me today, I've got Major General Beck. He is the CG of MISCO, as well as the PAE. Colonel Don Sidibe, he is the Cyber COE TID Director, and then my Sergeant Major Ben Coughlin. So foundational protection is very simply the individual and collective tasks that every individual soldier must be able to do in order to protect themselves. Examples of this are camouflage, noise and light discipline, passive air defense measures, signature management, communication windows. Operational protection is a little bit more complicated. It is the synchronization of kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities across the entire depth and breadth of the battlefield in order to protect the commander's scheme of maneuver in order to allow him to accomplish the objectives, him or her. So before we get really started into some questions, I'm going to give each of the different teammates an opportunity to talk about either foundational or operational protection from their protection. Sir?
Thanks, Joe, and to the team. Thanks for being on the panel. Don, I appreciate it. Sergeant Major, you work for me, so you kind of really didn't have a choice. Hey, so I want to build on some of the things that Joe talked about. And you know, yeah, I am very passionate about protection based on both my COE role and my PAE role. But the reality is, and I say this non-parochially, if we don't think about protection, maneuver, fires, sustainment, those are all mildly amusing, because we will only do them one time. And so protection has got to be part of our thought process from the beginning to the end. And the biggest thing that I would challenge y'all to think about, and please ask about, because these two gentlemen will talk very much in depth about operational and foundational protection. But really the difference that we're talking about as we look at layered protection, formation-based layered protection, is two aspects I would challenge. Number one, the effects of protection are cumulative by echelon. So what we do at the ground level, and that's why foundational is so important, if we don't start with that, we're never going to be successful. You're not going to get some magical device at the higher echelon that's going to take care of you. But they will have cumulative effects, hence the layering. So each echelon is very important to the layer below it as well. We are creating protection effects for that soldier on the ground with things we do at the theater level. And frankly, there probably aren't a lot of other warfighting functions that say that. So it is important that we work this by echelon. But probably the biggest change that I'd ask you all to think about is a mindset shift. We have got to get proactive with protection. So what do I mean by that? And as you walk through, and probably a lot of you represent things that are counter-UAS technologies, all very, very important. But at the end of the day, if we only focus on shooting down the UAS and not targeting deep or taking out the launch system or the formation or the C2 that goes with it, then we're always reactive. We are ceding the initiative to the enemy. We can't do that. So we have got to think about not only how do we shoot down the UAS that we can see and is about to engage us, but how are we fighting that fight deep? In our doctrine, we talk preserve, enable, deny. That's deny. We've got to deny the enemy's freedom of maneuver. And to do that, we have to leverage things. And this is why we say all the time, nobody owns protection. That argument works until something's screwed up, and then the chief reminds me that I own protection. But the reality is it's the synchronization of our assets. That's why we have one of our cyber partners here, because at the end of the day, it's about synchronizing all of the assets. Same thing with fires. I get asked all the time, well, is air defense artillery part of the protection portfolio? The answer is sure, but it's also part of defensive fires. So if an air defender shoots down something, they've asked me, well, are you going to take credit for that BDA? No, you should, because you shot it down. But I'm going to take credit for that because what you just did is you protected something, because that was coming in to engage something. So we've got to get much more comfortable with looking deep and thinking about protection on the deep end of the fight, because that will enable our maneuver. That will allow us to have the initiative. And frankly, and again, I'm saying this probably amongst sharks because we can shoot down 100 small UASs today. The enemy will go home tomorrow and they'll print 100 more. So while we need to have the technology to do that every single day, and that is critically important, if we don't start by what's going to take us out deep, whether that's kinetic or non-kinetic effects, then we are going to be in the reaction mode for the entire fight, and we will seize the initiative to the enemy, and we cannot do that. So I'll answer any questions we go through, but Joe, thanks, and I'll pass it over to the team.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Colonel Don Sedeby and General Beck, thank you for inviting me to this. Very excited and passionate about this. I get to be a bit of the odd duck that's talking about the EW cyber stuff, sorcery there. But what I like to remind people is all of the logic that you would use for your typical protection, for digging a foxhole and everything, the same logic applies for the EW in cyberspace. It's just the technical implementation is a little bit. But when we talk light and noise discipline, turns out light is electromagnetic radiation. So when you do it in that frame, then okay, what are all the things? If I'm emitting something, I am now have to be conscious of what the adversary can observe, and if we're taking lessons learned from Ukraine and other conflicts going on in an era of persistent observation, anytime you push a button and you're emitting, what needs to be ingrained in your thought and in our doctrine and our technology is how much time do I have before something's coming to me? How do I need to disperse? What am I moving to the next thing? So what we over in the Cyber Center of Excellence, in partnership with the other COEs as a transformation integration director, I think the most important word in my title is that integration aspect. It is less so about what we do as an individual or a COE, but what are we doing to collaborate and work with the collective, not just my FCD partners, which my FCD partners out in the crowd. If I need help, I'll tag a friend, but also with the PAE, the acquisition community. So as we're looking at that, what are we doing? So taking and for anybody that listened to Colonel Scott Schaefer this morning from the Maneuver Center of Excellence of what the TID does, going down the letters of the .mil-PF. So if I'm going to take that approach in the doctrine and training, a lot of what we're doing is operation and inculcating the lessons learned in the Ukrainian conflict, particularly with EW, counter-UAS, how we need to operate and fight. We've been churning updates to some technical circulars, how we're adjusting our doctrine, and then informing what material capability that we need, right? So if we're taking the framework of if I'm concerned with protection, how do I keep from being seen? How do I not be understood if I'm seen? How do I not be hit if I'm understood? And then how do I survive? Really those first three of the emissions control, how do we bake into our material solutions, the ability to rapidly change frequencies, software-defined radio type things. For confusion, effects like obfuscation, the MEMS capability and other things that are out there that I can present EW signatures that look like the thing that they're trying to target, but slightly offset or separate there and cause them to waste their fires. And then the prevention for being hit there, right? So the electronic attack components layered in with all of the rest of the kinetic fires. So a theme with this, and we're seeing it again with Ukraine and even recently with the what have you in Iran, is that there will always be something that gets through, right? If you're going to have a mass of things that are going there that are cheap there, we have to be efficient and layered in all the approach that we're taking. It turns out that every time I fire an EW system, the cost per bullet goes down every time I fire it. It's a joke, but also seriously. So with that, I'll hand it over to my partners, but very excited for any questions and feedback from the group.
Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ben Coughlin. I'm the MISCO Transformation Integration Sergeant Major. General Beck, Colonel Elsner, and I'm going to mess up your name, sir. I apologize. Sadvi. I appreciate the opportunity to be up here. So what I'm going to talk about is just foundational protection, all right? The Chief of Staff of the Army, the Sergeant Major of the Army, and everybody across talks about, hey, being brilliant at the basics. General Beck has then taken that and turned it into protection is everybody's business. If we look at protection as the functions under, there's 12 functional or tasks under there. MISCO doesn't own all 12 of those tasks. General Beck already talked about it. That's owned across the Army. So when we look at protection and we take it down to the base, the foundation of it, and before we do anything, we have to have a strong foundation. If you build a building, you need to make sure you pick the right foundation. So we already have that foundation in the United States Army. It's called basic training and BOLIC. And all of those tasks that we do in there, we talk about shoot, move, communicate. I've been in the Army for 22 and some change right now, and I've heard shoot, move, and communicate for the last 22 years. However, when we went into Iraq, we started finding out, hey, we needed to worry about medicate. So it changed to shoot, move, communicate, and medicate. Then we watched what happened over in Ukraine, and we said, hey, survivability is now a significant thing. So now it's shoot, move, communicate, medicate, and survivability. How we get after that is that we're training everybody how to put on camouflage, how to use cover and concealment, how to use noise and light discipline. And every officer and non-commissioned officer and soldier gets that in basic training in BOLC. When they start advancing through PME, when they start advancing in their career field, now we just sit there and take that basic foundation of all of those tasks we've already talked about, and we shape them into each of their CMFs. And as they continue to move up through echelon, we are building a layered approach on that. So the biggest thing that I'm going to talk about is really my experience with protection. I was with the 82nd during the withdrawal, and I was also there when the Ukraine war kicked off. And the way that we have to do that is we have to look at it from an operational perspective. The 3-4 is within the 3 for a reason. The 3 and the 3 November, the Ops Sergeant Major are sitting there taking care of all the things across the division or the Corps. The 3-4 is sitting back listening to the entire staff, listen vertically, and listen to everything that's going on. And they're looking at risk of miss and risk of force. And when they take that, they're operationalized, they're listening to targeting, they're listening to intel, and they're taking that back. And they're building on what they learned at basic training and BOLC, saying, hey, if I do this, hey, are they going to see me? Can I shoot them? And then can I move out? All right, so like I ask you to change your mindset on that. It's everybody's business is protection, because we are in charge of the most precious asset that America has, America's sons and daughters. And if we do not protect them, all right, and that's making sure that they know how to do camouflage and move at night and not being seen, then it doesn't matter about whatever technology we have. And the Ukrainians, I've been over there, they will tell you the same thing. So I ask you to take that mindset that General Beck talked about and think about we need to protect those people before we even start moving or doing anything else. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. I want to open up to any questions in the audience. We kind of covered a whole lot of information, but I'd like to know what other burning questions are out there when it comes to either foundational protection, operational protection, or the 4 key terms that Colonel Sadibi kind of highlighted, which is don't be seen, don't be understood, survive if hit, and avoid being hit.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate the panel and for being here. With all the proliferation of drones, particularly disposable drones at this piece, what are we teaching soldiers? What are we fielding around counter technology for on the maneuver? We're going to maneuver not like the Ukrainians do, but what do we see? What are we fielding? What's coming out either in the electronic spectrum or just the sort of the basic protection pieces?
So yeah, excellent, sir. So from the what we're fielding primarily to the EW soldiers, so TLS Manpack is the capability that's out there, and recently did a update of the 17 Echo. Those are the EW soldiers, their curriculum for employing those capabilities and getting it there. Also at the division level, we're starting to see early prototypes for the TLS EW out at 4th ID, 25th ID, and some other capabilities out at 82nd. So I would say we're on the leading edge of getting those material capabilities out there where our soldiers and formations can start from the EW perspective, really refining and integrating into the rest of the maneuver plan. I would emphasize that as we're doing it, back to the theme of layering of nobody's got the silver bullet, nobody's got hey, I've got my Manpack, I'm good to go, is okay, hey, if that gets you 15 to 20% attrition on drones and other things that people are throwing at me, how am I incorporating that in the maneuver plan? How am I looking at the rest of the terrain? Am I making sure that my RF fields of fire, for lack of a better term, are clear? And then what are the other ranges? So I would say we're starting to get that stage where EW soldiers are getting that capability in hand and starting to incorporate into maneuver formations. And I'll pass it off to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks. From the foundational piece, I don't know if everybody's tracking this, but about 18 months ago, TRADOC, when they were still said, we're going to redo basic training, right? We need to change from where we're at. So there's been things in there. There's already battle drills. They're continuing being updated. They're being taught in basic training. But now that we're incorporating drones for 2 different things, at Fort Leonard Wood, I know that Fort Benny's doing it and other ones, they're throwing drones up there and they're having the soldiers. So if they don't listen, right, hey, I just went out there, I made a foxhole. Now you have a drone, and we're really beating down that 360 degree, but not just in the circle, we're going for the sphere. So at Fort Leonard Wood, what's happening is we've developed a team within our training company that supports training they will videotape it. Then they'll come out there and they'll show their training. He's like, hey, you know, you were told to do camouflage. You were told to cover your heat signature. You were told to do all these things, right? Hey, you're all having problems. Here's a really bad day. And we're taking that feedback that's coming straight out of SAGU. It's going to CAC and everything like that, and it's based on what the colonel just said as well. And that feedback is coming right back down to the COEs, and there's a whole bunch of testing and piloting going on and basic training. We don't have the right answer right now. However, something I will sit there that we're really getting after is the Sergeant Major Army Chief of Staff are really beating up EIB, ESB, and EFMB, and those tasks in there, all right, all of those things, now they're looking at throwing in counter UAS stuff, and they're developing the battle drills on that.
And the only thing I would add to bring those two together is we're also looking at future formations. So how do we do things like fight the rear area of a division or a corps, and then how do we better align our processes from protection planning and execution with targeting? Because at the end of the day, targeting is a very known process that's been around a while, and targeting is absolutely focused on lethality forward. The reality, though, is most targeting isn't worried about what's going to kill you, it's what's going to limit your maneuver. And so it's integrating the protection planning and execution with targeting and training our staffs and different formations to do that. So it kind of builds on both of what these gentlemen said and really brings it back to that proactive piece.
What other questions do you have?
Hi there, Lindsay Linsky with the University of North Georgia. Hopefully we don't get feedback. So I'm excited to hear that basic training has starting to adapt. One thing that hasn't adapted much is the mandated ROTC curriculum in colleges, where, you know, of course there's pockets of different things doing great work as we are at UNG, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are in terms of what you think is most important for, you know, officers to learn prior to commissioning.
Okay, so I'm going to get probably a little bit out in front of my skis, but I think I would answer that in two ways. I think first, we've got to remember what we're looking for those graduates to be ready to do, and it's more about a thought process. So I think if they understand, and I'll go back to what the Sergeant Major said, and this, so I have the opportunity to talk to every new lieutenant that comes through Fort Leonard Wood once a month, and I always tell them, if you're not sure about why you joined the Army, if you're not sure what it means to be a leader, I want you to go to a basic training graduation before you graduate from whatever school you're in. Because you get to see not only those young men and women that volunteered to raise their right hand, but you get to see their parents. You get to see what it means, the responsibility of what you're doing. So I say that because I think when you think about things like protection, that's not something that's widely understood. Everybody knows it's important, but it's kind of one of those things that just happens. And I think the thought process of how to integrate all of the warfighting functions is something that all the ROTC programs do. And I think if the graduates that leave from North Georgia or wherever can have that initial understanding, then I think our job is through BOLIC to teach them to, you teach them to be an officer, we teach them to be a platoon leader. Or a lieutenant. And so I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but that would be my answer. And I am not the Cadet Command Commander for a reason.
Hey, so, okay. Hey, ma'am, so obviously I have nothing to do with developing officers, but I would say this to, regardless whether you're an officer, I would say this to non-commissioned officers, my officer counterparts and everything. The one thing I think that we need to do is change the mindset, and we need to start saying whether you're a private, whether you're an officer, you need to be a student of warfare. You also need to be a student of history, right? So, like, what do I mean by that? I mean that, hey, looking at these battles, right? Europe's been around for a very long time. We fought over there for a very long time. We might have new technologies, but that's not going to change the way. If we actually look back, autonomous capabilities were used during World War II. Now, they weren't effective. Well, they are somewhat effective, but they're not as effective as how it is. So I would say for officers in there, regardless, anybody that wants to be a member of the United States Armed Forces needs to be a student of warfare and understand what history is, and then learn the basics of it. Like, if you can understand the basics, Officers should have a good non-commissioned officer that's paired up with them that's going to say, hey, sir, ma'am, this is what I've seen through my time and experience, right? But if they understand what is the why behind it, Simon Sinek, I don't get paid for that at all, but I read a lot. He has great information. Understand why you're there. Understand that General Beck talked about what is such a great responsibility to be a leader and be in charge of America's sons or daughters. So, like, if you understand history, right, you will understand, hey, they did this thing and that ended up in this. I don't need to make that. We learn so much from history, so much from the blunders that we make, and we learn it through our job at protection, right? Hey, they didn't do this, and that's why that didn't happen. So I would say student of warfare and being a student of history, and then taking that and making sure you're invested every day and being engaged and having a willingness to learn and be humble enough to listen to everybody around you, and you'll be great. Because it's not about, I didn't make Sergeant Major on my own. My wife made it. She was senior to me, right? And all the people that I surrounded myself with, that's what made me successful. Somehow General Beck thought I was good enough to sit up here. It's probably because Colonel Elsner feels sorry for me. But that's my biggest thing. Be a student of warfare and be a student of history.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much. And the only thing I would add to that, right, in that same vein of emphasizing of if the nature of warfare is unchanging, but the character is what changes, right? The fundamental nature is what you're grounding them, and back into that student of history of everything. The mechanics protection is something that has to be considered and can be looked at in different contexts. And then with the more recent character, right, the one thing I would say, if there's a way to weave it in a curriculum, again, this is a bit of my cyber bias, right, but a fundamental understanding of what the EMS is, right? So whether you're an infantry officer, again, spent the first half of my career as an infantry officer, loved it, whatever flavor of officer, EMS is not just for EW cyber guys, right? You need to have a fundamental understanding of how you're operating in that space. The technical details other people will figure out, but you need to understand the basics and be able to visualize how that impacts your operations. And that's what I would add.
Sir. Hi, my name is Randy Hill from University of Southern California. I was just curious whether your portfolio covers protection from blast and overpressure and the effects on mild traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And I think, so the short answer would be yes, because when you look at the different tasks that go with protection, there's absolutely a medical sense to that. And so we have done a lot of study at Fort Leonard Wood over the years and continue to partner with our medical partners and learn as much as we can. And frankly, we have an organization that deals a lot with the modernization of explosives and demolitions, and that is something that they have worked also with not only the medical community but the special ops community. Yes, 100%.
What other questions? Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit outside of what we planned on talking about, and I'm going to put General Beck on the spot a little bit, as well as Colonel Sadivi. We've got about 5 minutes, so we'll see if we can cover it all. One of the things that we included in our doctrine over the past 2 years is protection-enabling tasks. So some of those tasks are outside of the normal 12 proponents and the 16 legacy tasks, but they absolutely have that protection effect. So when we approach this discussion, simple things, security operations, screen guard cover, area security, all have that protection effect. I'm also reminded from certain commanders that those are maneuver tasks. Fully acknowledge that, but if you could go into some details, sir, and Don, about what protection enabling tasks mean to you.
No, I appreciate that. And so I think that's an important distinction because, again, back to we don't own protection. We synchronize protection. We talk all the time. Again, I just left the 5th Corps Warfighter, and as I talk to both 5th Corps and 3ID, I talk to them about what elements are you bringing into the protection discussion. Do you have a targeteer in there so that they understand how to enable what you're trying, with the protection effect you're trying to create? Do you have our cyber partners, our space partners, and frankly, all too often, a lot of those non-kinetic capabilities, we don't think about them universally. To include the professionals that work in that space will often say, well, that's classified at a higher level, particularly as we talk to space. And that's true in many, many cases. But when I was the DCGM for 3 Corps, I used to have this discussion with my non-kinetic space guy all the time. I'd say, can we do this? Well, yes, sir, I've got this system and it does. Brother, I don't care. I don't have the mental bandwidth for everything that you just said. The question I asked was, can you create the effect on the battle space at the time and place I want? Yes, sir, I can. Okay, that was the end of the discussion. Thanks. The point to it is there's a lot of expertise that's going to make protection successful. Back to the guard and the screen, those are clearly maneuver tasks. But it's got to be that mindset shift, because what they're doing is they're protecting the flank. They're providing early warning. They're facilitating movement and maneuver. That is what protection exists for. I had my big boss ask me recently, what do we do in protection that is just for protection? And I said, nothing. We do protection to enable something else on the battlefield. And so as long as we know we are supporting in all cases, we will think about it differently. And so it's back to the same ADA discussion I had earlier. It's not about who gets credit for it. It's, did we enable the maneuver commander to accomplish his or her mission? And if the answer is yes, and you create a protection effect, and I enabled you to do your mission because of that, and you want to take credit for that, have at it. Because it's about the ability to bring all of those effects and the skills that each one of our professionals like Don bring to the table that I will never be able to represent, but have to leverage to successfully enable the fight and mission success. So thanks, and Don, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. No, thanks, sir. And what I would add to that, if you put the framework of a protection enabling task or effect, almost every single EW task or function that is out there is a form of a protection enabling task. If I'm using S2AS to sense the environment, okay, that has a protection effect of seeing what my footprint in the EMS looks like to understand my exposure. If I am doing electronic tech, that is a protection against a drone, enemy, whatever capability, preventing them from being seen. And when you frame it as a protection enabling task, all of a sudden, it's not me doing EW and say, hey, I did EW. It's who else knows what I've done, and how is that incorporated into my commander's maneuver plan and the protection plan? Because if I have a whole bunch of desynchronized effects that are doing great things, you have gaps and seams. So the effects that we generate in EW and cyberspace are only as good as their integration into a maneuver and protection plan. And so when you start thinking about that from a systems perspective, all of a sudden it helps that EW soldier warrant communicate, and that all of a sudden you're not talking hey, I was able to, hit this protocol at this thing and people's eyes are glazing over. It's okay, hey, I can get you 20% drone attrition at this range for this amount of time. Okay, hey, now you're starting to talk in a language that makes sense to a commander, and now you can be effective.
So I think that's about all we have. I want to give General Beck and the rest of the team an opportunity to say some final words.
So again, thanks for you all that came out and listened to this. Again, what I would ask, we have got to think about protection proactively, not just reactively. We've got to seize the initiative from, not lose the initiative to the enemy. And several of my fellow panelists have mentioned, we look at it in 4 different bins. First, not being seen. If you're seen, not being understood. If you're understood, not being engaged. And if you're engaged, surviving. We have done a lot of investment, a lot of important investment with all of you as industry partners on the survive aspect. We've got to keep that up. There's no doubt about it. But we've also, and the challenge I would give to all of you is, how do we think in the not being seen space? How do we think about that? How do we bring technology to bear so that we can, I won't say forget, because we'll never be able to forget, but we can potentially downplay some of the survive because our movement and maneuver is enabled because we're not seen. So if we can proactively protect and enable maneuver, again, we're always going to have to survive. There is no doubt about that. We're always going to have to shoot down that small UAS. But the reality is, if we're able to proactively protect ourselves, if we're able to prevent from being seen, prevent from being understood, and deny the enemy's freedom of maneuver, then part of protection is that movement and maneuver that we're just doing. So that's part of survival. We're not in one space for an extended period of time. So again, really appreciate the opportunity to talk today. Happy to stand by after the panelists are done. But we're really passionate about this. We think this enables maneuver at every single echelon for our Army and is critical. often misunderstood, often mischaracterized, but critical to our maneuver force success. So thanks for coming out today, guys. Don, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for inviting me. It's always good to start integrating, and really what I would emphasize is everything that T2COM, the PAE structure, is emphasizing, and what the Army is doing is getting everybody out of their stovepipes and to talk to each other, right? And I think this is a great example of, okay, hey, some people would ask, hey, what does cyber have to do with protection? Well, a lot if you think about it, right? So as we're tackling this problem and being able to fight in the new type of conflicts that we're seeing over in Ukraine, Iran, and other things, the only way that we're going to be able to move forward and to win the conflicts that we need to, which is all of them, it's a joke, is by working together and getting out of our stovepipes and start thinking about things not just in the way that we know in our functions, but integrated across the rest of the enterprise, and what is the holistic effect that we're bringing. Thanks so much for inviting me, sir.
Hey, the only thing I got is thanks for your time, and just please change your mindset. Remember that like protection is everybody's responsibility, and there's no greater responsibility than being in charge and leading America's sons and daughters. So like we have to actually put forth the effort, make sure that we synchronize across all the CMFs and everything like that. And if we do that, then we'll be unstoppable. But we have those gaps right now, and that's why protection is so important. And again, be a student of warfare and a student of history, because we're learning a lot. Iran, the invasion in Israel, or the attack in Israel, Ukraine, there's all these things out there, but if we don't pay attention to it, then we're going to repeat those mistakes if we don't pay attention to it, and that'll end up in the lives, and we can't, we're not ready for that, and nobody wants to sit there and have that American flag taken to somebody's house knowing that we could have taken action to protect them and be more proactive. So again, please remember that like it's everybody's responsibility, and we need to be proactive to protect our force. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Chris?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting ready for our next panel. If I can ask you to...
Good to see you.
Oh, no. Clear the stage area so we can go ahead and get our new panel members situated. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're ready. Welcome to the Warriors Corner. The next panel, and I've been instructed to do it this way, is going to be Mr. Hyacinth Seelan, Colonel Guy Yelverton, Mrs. Sarah Parker, and Mr. Kevin White, and they're going to talk to you about countering the threat, global operational support for counter UAS.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to start by saying thank you for the host to putting this together, and to DEFCON C5ISR for hosting us. My name is Hyacinth Seelan, and I'm the test integrator for the Joint Interagency Task Force 401. That's a mouthful. But for those who doesn't know what JAEDA 401 does, is that we are the counter-UAS synchronizers for the DOW. I'm here to speak to you on some of the efforts that JAEDA is working. So right now we have 3 lines of efforts. Those are the Defend the Homeland, Warfighter and Security Personnel Lethality, and Joint Interagency Training. I'm going to speak to you about the last 2. Specifically from the point of science and technology. So warfighter and security personnel, we have one measure of effectiveness, which is delivering a state-of-the-art counter-UAS capability, the warfighter at home and abroad. That's it. With that stance, we have built a marketplace. So there's a counter-UAS marketplace that it's already online and growing. The idea there is to make sure that we have sensors, effectors, and mission capabilities all in one place for the warfighter and the interagency to be able to go there, read the capabilities, and be able to purchase counter-UAS technology. I want to note that these technologies are engineered to be effective while protecting the privacy and principles. So it's important that we minimize the data that we are collecting, and we compartmentalize that data to make sure that we're protecting industry's data on the marketplace. I would like to encourage you to read the Counter-UAS Operation safeguarding freedoms and preserving privacy. That is war.gov. So that way you can inform yourself a little bit more about that data privacy. The second line of effort that I want to talk to you is the joint interagency training and the efforts that we're doing there. We're here to offer test and evaluation support, planning, training, and policy development for the warfighter and the interagency. When JAEDA stood up, the first event that we executed was Operation Clear Horizon exercise. During that exercise, there's a lot of lessons learned that was spun up from there. We had all the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, counter-UAS technologies that were all in place, and that exercise allows us to understand the state of the counter-UAS and has been a source to inform decisions that the JAEDA is doing afterwards. So it continues to inform what we're moving and working on. The next event that I would like to point out is recently we did a AMP-HEL high-energy laser demonstration with the FAA to allow or to inform the FAA, the interagency, of what the lasers technology does and what doesn't do, and make sure that they understand the operations to accelerate the delivery of that capability to our warfighters. It's important to make sure that any events or any of the testing that you may be participating on, is that you have the right instrumentation, that you have the right data collection and analysis plan to make sure that we are consolidating all the knowledge and pass it on to make sure that the JAEDA can consolidate it all and build that body of knowledge to inform the warfighter. Recently, we published the common criteria for counter-UAS characterization document, which currently is on the QE. However, we're working on the process to make sure that we can downgrade it to unclass and be able to share across the board. Another step that we have done is that recently got signed a agreement between the UK MOD, Ministry of Defense, and the US to allow to share that data. So the counter-UAS technology can be freely shared among our allies. Lastly, the JAEDA intends to publish and update the calendar of the events that we are looking to participate in. We're looking to keep an eye on. So that one is going to be published to make sure that industry and services keep track of what we are focusing our attention on. So with that, I would like to thank again the host to putting this together, and DEFCON C5ISR. I look forward for the Q&A once we get to the Q&A, and I'm going to pass it on to Colonel Jerverson for his remarks.
Thanks, Haising. So I'll start off the same way you finished, and I just want to say thanks to AUSA, the C5ISR team, and my fellow panel members for inviting me to join you this afternoon. So a great opportunity to come talk about counter-UAS. And just to introduce myself again, Guy Yelverton. I'm the Capability Program Executive for Defensive Fires, a new organization that just stood up in the last 5 weeks. We gain our heritage from the former PO missile in space, so I have all the air missile defense and counter-UAS capabilities of the former PO missile in space and the RCTO, the Rapid Capability Critical Technology Office, with their Directed Energy Program Office that falls underneath my portfolio as well. So that's what brings me here, is talking air missile defense, counter-UAS specifically. And when I look at counter-UAS, it is, I don't really need to state this, but I'll state it anyways, it's a real and growing operational requirement. Our focus is on delivering a layered, integrated, and affordable defensive architecture that combines sensors, command and control, fire control, kinetic interceptors, non-kinetic effectors, while working closely with soldiers and industry to move that capability to the field faster. So this PA realignment that we've gone through, and I should highlight that CP Defensive Fires falls under Portfolio Acquisition Executive Fires. But under that PA realignment, this acquisition transformation that we're all going through, and it really draws the CPE and the Fire Center from the Aviation Missile Center closer together. Now, Sarah will tell you that, as a PM for Storm and IFRCO in the past, I've always had a very close relationship with Sarah and Hunter Blackwell over there as we looked and moved S&T capabilities from S&T through what I've always called the trench of death, because it's a man-made obstacle that we put in our own way to get S&T into our programs of record. But by partnering together, we're able to transition those S&T capabilities into the program of record. But what this PAE realignment does is it brings us even closer together. It allows us to more succinctly and tightly look at our priorities, our requirements, and our resourcing to ensure that all three align so that we can get out after what the warfighter needs, what's critically needed. We're able to focus even tightly because we're under the same umbrella now. We look at that and we synergize between all of that. But within CP Defensive Fires, within our counter-UAS portfolio, as the Office of Primary Responsibility for Counter-UAS Material Development, we have 5 lines of effort that drive us in providing capability to the warfighter in a timely manner. And those 5 lines of efforts are the Joint Urgent Operational Needs Statements, what's going on downrange today, say in the CENTCOM AOR. Our Homeland LOE2 is our Homeland and Specified Fixed Site, so think installation, protection, not only in CONUS but around the world. Our counter-UAS batteries that provide that division commander divisional prioritization for him to protect his forces against the UAV threat. And then that's at the divisional level. We realize there's a gap there. As I look down into the formation within division, I need to think about the brigade and below. And so we created lines of effort 4 and 5 that get after the soldier and unit common counter-UAS capabilities. And when you think about especially the first 2 priorities, JUONS and HISFIS, that's where our partnership with JIATF 401 is incredibly tight. We were close together when it was the Joint Counter-UAS Office, and as they mature into the JIATF 401, that relationship becomes even stronger, because right now, in today's fight, we are working together to make sure we're providing capability to our warfighter in real time. I don't even want to say near real time, because the teams out there, I've given them some ideas, they've given us some ideas. We're out there getting capability to our warfighters on today. Great point. And we're looking for new capability. We're reaching out here across this floor, the other floors that are here within the Von Braun Center, looking for capability that we can provide tomorrow. That's how fast that we need to move to make sure that we're fighting that UAV threat that we're reading about in the newspapers and online. And then for that 4th line of effort, our soldier common counter-UAS capability, we don't want to hold all this to ourselves. Like we're sharing with JIATF 401 and we're partnering to protect installations in our deployed warfighters. For the soldier common capability, we're bringing in PAE ground maneuver ground, specifically the former PEO soldier teammates, and we're transitioning the soldier common capability off to that formation, because that's their bread and butter, looking at soldier common, soldier wearable, soldier borne capability. And so we're partnered up with them over this year, and we'll complete the transition at the beginning of FY27. But that doesn't mean we separate from them. We stay tied together because that capability needs to be integrated. The most important thing about our counter-UAS systems is that integration, where we can bring a component from any one of our vendors out here on the floor that are in the sense, decide, and act arena, and bring them together on the fly. That's what JIATF 401's downrange doing right now. That's what our team's been downrange doing for the last couple of weeks, is bringing together sensors and effectors with our decision-making system, IBCS or IBCS maneuver or FAD-C2, whatever's downrange, we're integrating through that decision-making tool to provide that warfighter the capability to defeat the enemy before it gets inside their boundaries. And so with that integration, with those different components, there is no silver bullet. We're not looking for a silver bullet, a one-trick pony that answers all these questions. We've had a few competitions in the past year. We've got a few competitions ongoing right now that, as I've stood on the stage at those industry days, what I make sure that all of our industrial partners know is that I'm not looking for one vendor. I'm looking for many vendors to solve many different problems, to fill many different capability gaps, to fill in the cracks and the seams. And I need many production lines because you can see the threat's out there and it's everywhere. This drone threat proliferates everywhere all the time, and we need to make sure that we can give all sorts of capabilities. So it requires many production lines, many capabilities, many sensors and many effectors to get the job done. And that's why the marketplace is so important to us. As we learn to work together on that one and support one another, that's going to be important to us as we move forward. But as I close, the most important thing is our partnership, not only with JIADA 401, not only with my S&T teammates, but with my industry partners, because you are where the ideas come from. Where if it's not S&T, as my former Army acquisition executive stressed to me, as I look for new handheld, soldier common, unit common, you have solutions today that are on the shelf that are being used around the world. That's where we need to go first and foremost. And as I take the S&T efforts that we're working on for our long-term programs of record, integrate that back into the program, that's where I get to work with industry through my S&T partners to bring that capability in to drive that to the warfighter as fast as possible. So my industry teammates, all of you all sitting out here, you are a key and essential piece to what we're trying to accomplish to get this counter-UAS capability to our warfighter as quickly as possible. And so again, I just thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to the Q&A, and I'll hand off to Miss Sarah Parker.
Thanks, Colonel Yelverton. Thanks also to AUSA for giving us the opportunity to talk about counter-UAS today. Just a brief introduction. As mentioned, my name is Sarah Parker. I'm the Deputy Director for the Fires Directorate within the Aviation and Missile Center, but I also am dual-hatted. I help lead the Army's counter-UAS IPT. It started as DevCom, but it's grown. SMDC is a part of that as well. You see behind me, I call it the wagon wheel. There's a name associated with each lab and center within DevCom and SMDC that represent core capabilities, core technologies, and competencies that are brought to the counter-UAS fight. And what was identified a number of years ago is everyone needs to be focusing on the drone threat. And all of our labs and centers need to be looking at what technologies can be brought to bear for that fight. And so we saw a need to try to culminate amongst the S&T community, but also to be a bit of a connection to industry. So you heard from JIADF talking about demonstrations, things they're trying to get fielded today, the marketplace. You heard from Colonel Yelverton on the Army side, the programs of record, and the JUONs that we're trying to help field things right now. And what I want to talk about on my side of things is the technology and also the expertise and where industry can plug into that. So you see names and faces maybe a little bit, but wanted to talk also about, how do we get technology across the Valley of Death? How do we get technology fielded, and where do folks plug in? And so what we really try to do is be very integrated into JIADF. So there's probably an Army S&T person, an Army lab person that is in every JIADF meeting that they have, and there's one every day, a couple a day. We want to just be really plugged in. We also try to be very plugged in with the Army, the PAE fire side. What's going on? What's new and emerging? What are the gaps? What can't industry do right now? What is not commercially available? Where do we apply resources, technology, funding to get after what the newer drone threats are? So that's in sense, decide, act, kinetic and non-kinetic, and directed energy as well. And so we've got just a little diagram here that shows what feeds, go back one if you would, just what feeds how we identify the technology gaps and the communities that help with that, and then leveraging a number of funding sources and do tech capability development with industry partnership and involvement, and really trying to bring folks in early to that and provide overmatch. Next chart, if you would. Wanted to just show a little bit and highlight, there in blue you see here are all the technology areas and systems and capabilities that address the drone threat that we have equities in and that we're working on. And so a lot of times when you think about S&T, you think about, well, that's a long ways away. But we really try to bring expertise to support as evaluators for GIADF experimentation, as well as tech expertise to support programs that are in the program offices, as well as looking 5 years, 10 years ahead and saying, okay, where are we with power? Where are we with extending the range? Where are we with the cost overmatch problem? How do we get after that? And so we have our kind of traditional lanes, but we also have some of what we call Fight Tonight. And I wanted to really just pass it over to Mr. Kevin White and let him share about, a lot of you know about our tech development and some of our longer term efforts, but I want to give him a chance to talk about some of the things that the labs and specifically C5 is doing to support the GIADF and the Army to help today with some of the nearer term missions. So take it away, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Fight Tonight's obviously a big deal. We love to stay ahead of the threat of tomorrow and prepare to fight tomorrow. But with the speed of the UAS threat and the counter-UAS mission space, evolving Fight Tonight's pretty mission critical. So the group I lead at C5ISR, we provide operational support for that. It's a lot of boots on ground. It's around the world deployed with the warfighter. And our job is a few different things. Focused primarily on making sure that we're bringing threat-realistic red teaming and those representative adversary threats into the different missions that might be required for some of what was mentioned to the folks to my right for experimentation or the competitions or a warfighter training event or even a vulnerability assessment. Can Erbil Air Base see all the drones they need to see? And if there's a gap in the layer defense, for example, right now with the real world things going on, let's find that gap and get it filled quickly, working with GIADF and others that have those really rapid acquisition authorities. So on the counter system side for experimentation, can the counter system see what they need to see? Can they defeat what they need to defeat? And then, like was mentioned, there's no silver bullet. Nothing's 100% effective. So let's see what level of success they have and then help the folks to my right identify what else might be needed in that layered defense onion to fill those other gaps. So our group doesn't just bring the threats and fly them arbitrarily, but operating them with the TTPs you might see in a forward deployed environment through real world, higher level classified reporting, or even what's unclassified. There's a lot of stuff out there on social media that gets dropped, right? And we try to replicate that in the events. Also for training and exercises, those are really good because we're working with the warfighters and we're getting their feedback firsthand on how these counter systems are operating and how it might be enabling or impacting or negatively affecting their ability to shoot, move, communicate, and do their other job. At the soldier level, once you get below air defense, you're not going to find so many guys or gals where their full-time job is counter UAS. They're infantry, they're maneuver support, they're a medic even. So they have a job they have to do full-time, and counter UAS is supposed to enable that job, not inhibit that job. And we get that real-time feedback and feed it back to 401 and to the S&T group and say, here's what we're hearing from warfighters from what they're saying. And then also let them develop their TTPs and response procedures against the UAS threat, because we might be coming at them with things like the fiber optics and the FPVs, and really gets them the sets and reps they need to build that critical muscle memory. So when the real thing happens, like the last 3 weeks in CENTCOM, to operate at the speed they've needed to operate in that forward deployed environment, that needs to be muscle memory at this point. You can't be doing that the first time. And getting the sets and reps to build that muscle memory is what we bring to the fight. And then the third piece, and then we'll pause for question and answer, is the layered defense, the installation, the vulnerability assessment side. And I'll just mention one in the news because Fort McNair was in the news recently for some potential incursions. It was all over open source. Our job is to go to an installation like that in the homeland or forward deployed and try to find those gaps before the adversary finds them. And when we find those gaps, make a recommendation to GIADF or others what might be needed, whether it's a radar or an effector or something non-technical, better camo, better hardening, better training. They have the equipment they need, but the security forces don't quite know how to use it. Get that feedback and then let them make those really quick iterative improvements to improve their ability to fight tonight. And then if something comes up where they need another piece of technology, feed that right back to GIADF 401, who's been really great leveraging their new authorities that they've been given to get stuff bought, get it fielded, and get in the warfighters' hands really, really quickly. We were going to leave 10 minutes for questions, and we're right on the dot. Look at us.
I know. All right. Well, so I was just going to say, appreciate the time to let us explain everything, and we wanted to open the floor for questions if anybody had any.
Thank you. I don't know if this is the right way to ask the question, but where is your proving ground? I know you've got all these ideas, and you've said you're all over the world. So is there a proving ground, or should there be a proving ground close by?
Yes, so the DOW has a number of ranges and proving grounds that they are established. And the reason why we don't have a single point is if the counter-UAS technology that we're trying to test and develop is, let's say, a soldier mounted. I don't need a big airspace and ground space that is not being utilized. Or if I'm going to go try to shoot a drone that has some kinetic or explosive, then not all ranges will be able to accommodate everything. So if I'm going to try to do techniques that they're classified in the spectrum, I cannot do it in the same range that I'm going to shoot 360 degrees, 30 mic, for example. So the problem is representing or selecting one range limits the DOW in order to facilitate all the spectrum that the counter-UAS needs to be evaluated. So to answer your question, there are the DOW's ranges will be primary. We'll go to any other range that the interagency is using, as long as the data is being collected in a manner that is meaningful and will inform the warfighter. So instead of selecting one, there's multiple that they're the primary, but they're not the only one. The JIADF will look at any event anywhere.
Could I just follow up on that? So how do you, proving ground may have been a limited way, but you need to have these things proved in the hands of whoever is going to use these capabilities. And that's my question, follow-on question. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's great. And that is a good segue to how I was going to pile on Hai-Sing's answer anyway. So part of it is the controlled, somewhat controlled environments that UMA or White Sands Missile Range or what have you, that Hai-Sing's group is really great. And then when there's a certain down select and things have been selected to maybe go forward deployed or even sent to the southern border, now there's another proving ground. I've done thousands of missions for counter-UAS in the last 10 years of doing this full time. I've never seen a sensor or effector operate the same way in two different places. It just doesn't exist. To take the Army term, MET-TC, right? There's the terrain, there's the RF environment. It's hot, it's cold. Do they operate when it's foggy? Do they not operate when it's foggy? And so you have to then ultimately field them where they might be intended to operate, and then get some good data on, all right, this one's really good in cold terrain, which we just support an event in Alaska through Indo-PACOM on. They wanted to know in Alaska what works really well when it's negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and we support an event there. And then maybe this sensor might work really well in a desert. This one might work well in a mountainous terrain like South Korea, and then get all that data and then further feed that to the marketplace and other things like JIADF. So then when you ultimately go in there, the soldiers, ideally at the end of the day, will be able to see, all right, this one worked pretty well in triple canopy. This one worked well in hot weather. This sensor integrates well with that effector to make a good layered defense from that good feedback that's fed back into the marketplace to help make those decisions. But ultimately, you're spot on. You have to evaluate not just in a controlled environment, but where it's going to be fielded with the soldiers that are going to be operating it, because that's what it's designed to do at the end of the day, right?
And I'll add to that. So we're doing all that, and you hit the two ranges that we use the most for proving out, qualifying components and pieces and parts. But the other thing we're doing in the Army is the transformation and contact. So we're buying equipment. Soldier Common is the easiest one I can hit on right off the bat, and we're fielding that equipment to transformation and contact brigades. Let's see what month this is. March. So we've hit about 9 brigades already, providing them kit that they're using at the National Training Center, at the JRTC, or they're deploying with it and actually using it in combat operations. And we're getting all that feedback from the warfighter that's using the actual equipment. Feedback of, do you like this? Do you want more of this? What other TTPs could you use, or what would be better to use? And we take that back into our next competition. So we're actually getting information back from the warfighter using it in their brigades, in training environments or actual combat environments as well. Not just the demonstrations, experimentations, everything we're talking about. We're covering the entire gamut. And I would say, to go to the other end of the spectrum, industry also has their own ranges. And we're going out with them as the material developer, going out to their facilities and observing the equipment firsthand, up front and early, and then allowing that, and then moving that forward faster as well, because we're learning as early as we can with our industry partners. So we're covering the entire spectrum from birth to in the soldier's hands and getting feedback and making the system, the components, the pieces, the parts better and better and better.
Last thing I'll add is
Gotcha.
JIADF is setting testing standards right now. That's one of the primary goals that they've set this year. Is we're going to have a list of these are the expectations, so that a company doesn't come to a test event and say, I did this, but somebody say, oh, this wasn't a very good test, it wasn't very representative. And C5 has a group, and they partner with AVMIC as well in creating threat representative drones. And so we're not just going against DJIs that have limited capability. We're trying to really represent what we're seeing out there.
Okay, would you comment on how you work with DHS, and also how you're coordinating or working with the National Counter UAS Training Center here at Redstone?
Great question. So right now, the interagency, General Ross has selected folks, and right now there's some folks from the interagency CBP is sitting at our office on a daily basis. There are members within the divisions on the JIADF that they are in meetings with DHS, making sure that we are stepping, knowing what each of us are doing. We are aware, we have the point of contact, and we're in communication with the SNT community within DHS. And that's how we are partnering with the not only DHS, it's also the interagency, FAA. We're in the process of getting agreement to get them into our workspace to make sure that we streamline some of the coordination and facilitate, again, it's to agilize and get speed to deliver that capability tomorrow to the warfighter. And there's all the red tape that needs to be cut, that we are sitting side by side to make sure that we're all tracking how to pass the ball and nobody's dropping that ball.
So for the other part of your question, I see your hand, sir. FBI. So we have an MOA here between the FBI, the JIADF, and CP Defensive Fires, PA Fires, for co-use of, there are ranges here on the installation. There are unique capabilities that the FBI has built here that we can utilize to test some of our capabilities, but they also, it's not a one-way street. They're gaining information from us because we're able to do more development, R&D than they can, and so we're learning from each other. And so it's a great partnership that we have here on post as well, to your question, sir.
Yeah, hi, Ken Kreitzer, CamVets Media. When you say ready to fight tonight, it sounds like what the leadership in South Korea is always saying, General Brunson and General Lombardo. Is the threat from drones particularly acute with North Korea? They have always talked about artillery from North Korea, but would drones be another key threat that the Army has to consider?
You go ahead.
Yeah, we have a pretty standard saying at this point that from asymmetric adversaries to peers and near peers, everyone has access to it, and you should safely assume if we're going to be in a combat battle space with anyone for the foreseeable future, unmanned systems from ground to maritime to air will be part of the fight. You want to add, sir, or have a wrap-up comment?
All I would just say is that I think that threat could come from anybody. In the homeland, outside the homeland, anybody. So I would be wary of any adversary having the capability of UAVs, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon. My question is, how much of a simulated environment are you using to test and integrate to evaluate any systems gaps instead of an actual virtual environment to test?
Yeah, so Right, there's multiple approaches, both from cleaning the environment to make sure that you understand the capabilities that you are measuring, because sometimes when you have clutter, you don't know if the system is performing great because the environment is too noisy, or the system is performing poorly because the environment is too noisy. So you have to go and test and understand what is the variable that you're trying to measure, pay attention to that variable, and fix all the other ones so you can really learn. However, there are multiple techniques in order to simulate the environment, both from electromagnetic environment through temperature and weather, like Kevin mentioned. They supported a test in Alaska, so cold is one of those measure of performance that we need to hit. So going to a site that has the environment is key to make sure that we are learning how that system is going to perform in that environment. Does that answer? Okay.
All right, I just got nominated to wrap up. So I appreciate the time. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about counter-UAS and how important it is. As you can hear, it's the teaming that solves the problem. It's the teaming with industry for all of us that solves this problem and gets our warfighters the capability they need as quickly as possible. And they need a lot of it, and they need it incredibly fast. So I appreciate your support, and we'll be on the side if you have any other questions. Thanks. Have a great day.
Okay, good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. As we get prepared for the next presenter, the next panel, I ask that you go ahead and find your seats, and those that are asking questions, if you don't mind, move over to the side so we can go ahead and get started momentarily. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our next panel will begin. Colonel Jason Bohannon, CPE A&E, along with his teammate, Mrs. Caitlin Tanney, Deputy Project Manager, Maneuver Ammunition Systems, CPE A&E, and Colonel Vincent Morris, Project Manager, Close Combat Systems, also CPE A&E. And their panel is Counter UAS at the Tactical Edge and Lethality for Small UAS.
Sir, thank you for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jason Bohannon. I am the Capability Portfolio Executive for Ammunition and Energetics up at Picatinny Arsenal. I think if many of you are paying attention to the PAE CPE construct, the CPE for Ammo and Energetics is what was known as the JPEO for Ammunition and Armaments up at Picatinny. So today on the stage with me, I've got Ms. Caitlin Tanney, who's the acting Deputy for PM Maneuver Ammunition Systems and the PM for Close Combat Systems. So real briefly, I'll talk about CPE A&E and our organization, and then I'll turn it over and we'll talk about counter UAS at the tactical edge. So in our portfolio, we've got a handful of PMs. We've got PM Maneuver Ammunition Systems. In that portfolio, we have all the small caliber. We have all the medium caliber. So think 25, 30 millimeter, 40 millimeter cannon, cannon munitions. And then we also have large caliber who does tank ammunition, and they also do non-standard ammunition, and they source from all around the world to help our allies and partners. My second PM is PM Combat Ammunition System. So this is all my indirect fire. Think artillery, think mortars, think precision guidance systems and kits that go on those munitions. PM Close Combat, which is Vince's portfolio, really has 300 plus products in it. Has everything from shoulder launch munitions, hand grenades, pyrotechnics, flares and chaffs, but he's also getting into some pretty interesting lethal payloads, which we're going to talk about today, in addition to terrain shaping options. And the last product lead that we have in the CPE is called PL Joint Services. They're responsible for modernization of the contractor-operated ammo plants. So today I'm going to turn it over and kick it off with one of our rock stars, Caitlin.
Okay, good afternoon. Caitlin Tanney, Deputy for PM Mass at CP A&E. And I know I am between you and probably your next happy hour, so I'll be sure to entertain you and as well as provide you with good information. Go to the next chart. So we are sitting in the center of what is probably missile central, and we all know how important missiles are to the fight. We see it in the news, but there's also a point where missiles can't get after every munition, every threat. So we need to supplement that with something that we already have within our formations. Missiles play a critical role in what we're doing against the threat in our current situation and in the future. We also have to recognize that we don't have the capacity, nor should we be using missiles for every threat we see that's from an aerial perspective. There is things to consider, not just cost, but also logistical burden, collateral damage, magazine depth, and also just where are we fighting? Where are we getting those missiles to? How do we get them there? How does our industrial base really handle the capacity that's needed for something like missiles? So this is where we know missiles play an important role, but we also need to supplement that role. Should we be using missiles for a Group 1? Maybe if it is protecting an asset that is way highly valuable, but maybe we shouldn't. Maybe this is just a surveillance mission and that we need to make sure that our formations in the field are protecting that. So this is where ammunition comes in. So ammunition is playing a critical role in counter UAS. And if we go to the next chart, nothing new with proximity fusing. Proximity fusing has been around since World War II. You can read books about it. It's in missiles, it's in mortars. So that's not the novel part. What's novel is that we are taking this proximity fuse capability and we are miniaturizing it into a very small form factor. We're taking your Bradley fighting vehicle and creating a counter-UAS capable by using the armament that is already on the system. We're taking the infantry soldiers who already have Mark 19s within their squad and providing them with counter-UAS capability. So what is proximity fusing? Proximity fusing is a radar that is within the munition that is going to detect something. So this isn't new. Hand sanitizers have prox radars, but what's different is it's going to withhold the gun force, the environmental standards that are needed in ammunition. So it's going to, the G-force from a weapon system of 30 millimeter is nothing like this hand sanitizer. So what is important about it is that we are looking for vendors and industry partners to help get after this miniaturized proximity fusing. This is the future. There is no, you have to hit the round to kill it. You have to hit the threat to kill it. You just need to get into the vicinity of that. So that is what we're doing here at CPE A&E. We are taking legacy ammunition, testing that we've already accomplished, and really innovating at the round. We can't be fielding new weapons and new platforms into every formation. There is a space for air defense, and it holds, we've seen that in wars in the past, but we also, it's everybody's problem now. So we can't depend on just the air defense mission to protect our airspace. So we go to the next chart. So what have we been doing? So as I said, we've pretty much proliferated our formations with this proximity fuse technology. We are taking systems that have been in the field for decades. Let's take the Bradley. I know we've all been trying to replace the Bradley for about 3 decades now, but it's still in our formation. And what we saw in Ukraine is that it plays a pivotal role in our formation. The Bradley's putting up a good fight, but you know what the biggest threat to the Bradley was? The UAS, and it still is. So in our next war, or in our current war, as you see all over social media, UAS is a threat and it's not going away. So what can we do with the weapon systems and the platforms that we already have? And so this is what we're doing it. So I'm not going to go through all this chart, but it really just describes, we're doing this across medium caliber at the moment. So we're taking missile technology, mortar technology, and we're miniaturizing it in medium cal capability. Medium cal helps ammunition. Medium cal ammunition is in all the joint force, the Air Force, the Marines, the Army, the Navy. All of them are using a medium cal weapon system on their platforms. What started this was what we're called 30 mic, and I know they brought it up in the previous briefing, where this is the first medium cal technology that was put into the field with this prox fusing. It's supporting MLIDS, it's supporting the Marine Corps' MADIS, and it's also supporting our aviation community with the Apache. Because we were able to miniaturize this capability, we're turning our legacy systems into something that can also be in the fight for counter-UAS. Where we started with 30 millimeter for Apache and MLIDS and M-SHORAD and MADIS, we've proliferated to the Bradley. We're looking at the Stryker and weapon systems on Navy ships, as well as our 40 millimeter within the Mark 19. Go to the next chart. So it's only a cool briefing if there's cool videos, and I probably will eat my words when they don't work. But if we could try to click through the videos, yes. So this is 1211. This is our 30 millimeter. This was a test. The former JIAD, what is now JIADF, which was the Joint Counter-UAS Office. We did a demonstration where that 30 millimeter, which typically was on the Apache, is now on ground systems, was demonstrated against a Group 1